Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition, very irregularly scheduled edition of Civil War Seattle's Civil War Unscripted. Tonight I am very happy to have familiar faces, probably to a lot of you guys, John Heckman of the Tattooed Historian and Cameron Sowers of the Ivory Towers of Academia, and Avery Lentz, who we're having a little tech issue with, so we're trying to get Avery hooked up here. Let's see how this is working out. Are we good
Much
to go
better.
over here?
Yep.
All right.
We're good.
Okay.
Hello.
So, for anybody who's watched this previously, these events have really had our best viewership, these unscripted events, and they are exactly what it says. And I think it's been pretty fun and pretty entertaining. And before I go around and have everybody introduce themselves, and then we kind of just roll into what we want to talk about, think of tonight as like four dudes, historians that have been just hanging out on the battlefield of Gettysburg, and we're now in the pub having a beer, talking shop. And you guys that are watching, please comment and questions, anything you want, because we want you to be involved in what we're talking about and give us ideas as well. We all have a different probably aspect of enthusiasm for Gettysburg or the Civil War or different angles. So you never know what you're going to get out of me or these other three guys here. So there really is no agenda other than just see what happens. And we're going to talk about Gettysburg. So I guess we can go clockwise. Maybe Cameron, tell us a little about you, what you're working on, so on. And then John and Avery can jump in too.
Yeah, so thanks again, Rich, for having me on. I'm thankful to continue to be allowed back on. I never know if I'll get like the invite again. So I'm currently a grad student at the University of Kentucky. But probably what's of interest to anyone tuning in tonight is that I did my undergrad at Gettysburg College. So I spent 4 years living in Gettysburg, living adjacent to the battlefield. My current research right now is about Reconstruction. I'm writing about coastal South Carolina and the Freedmen's Bureau. So that's where my work's at. Or if you tuned into a program I did with Rich a couple months ago on F. Scott Fitzgerald and Civil War memory, those are the kind of things I'm balancing right now.
All right. And John, for those unfamiliar with you and your work.
My name is John. I'm known to online audiences as the Tattooed Historian. I am surprised to see Cameron on here. I thought we had a discussion about this, that he wasn't allowed back on. But here we go. I'm found on quite a few platforms now. I started my brand back in 2015, and the whole Tattooed Historian thing was just a little fun little thing that I started, and it quickly turned into something bigger that I wasn't expecting. And I was live streaming before the pandemic, so I'm kind of an old grandpa as far as that's concerned with it, and helped quite a few people learn how to live stream during the pandemic.
Sure.
And I grew up 25 miles from Gettysburg in a town called Chambersburg, which was burned in 1864, and I've been just involved in history since the age of 8. So quite a long time, well before Cameron was born. And probably Avery too.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
On that note, I'm Avery Lentz. I'm the creator and host of the Battles and Banter podcast. We jump started in January of 2019 because my co-host Tony Brown and Cody Esch, we all, of course, have big history backgrounds. I got my master's with Shippensburg University, so some Ship alum there. Also undergrad at Gettysburg College. So speak of the devil, we're talking about Gettysburg tonight. But yeah, it's a great show. We're currently on a little bit of a hiatus due to personal reasons, but we still have a bunch of stuff planned for later in the year. Hope to hit our 100th episode. So if you want to give us a follow, give us a subscription, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So cool.
Well, I can vouch for everybody here as far as they're following their content, or, in the case of Cameron, he doesn't have his own podcast yet, so he's lagging. We'll get there someday when you're here. I don't know. I can endorse the activity, but I can also say don't start this stuff either. Yeah, don't stay where you're at. You're good. Stay out of this cesspool of social media and stuff.
Yeah.
But so Gettysburg, now that we're on the eve of the annual celebration, anniversary, whatever, of the battle in a couple days, the campaign, of course, we are now several weeks into the anniversary of everything that leads up to the actual fighting on July 1st. So this campaign really encompasses, 8 weeks of activity, really, between when Lee starts north until he finally returns down to Virginia and they kind of get settled in. But we're really going to focus on the 3-day battle. And I was going to start with the classic question that everybody wants to know is, what would have happened had Stonewall Jackson
Oh, damn it, Richard.
been at Gettysburg?
I'm logging off.
There's some
Really bad. That's
that there may be time travelers from the 2030s that figured out how to build a time-space travel machine to send a NASA astronaut back to save Stonewall Jackson's life. Look for it on local bookshelves. It looks captivating. It just came out today. That inspired me to think about Stonewall Jackson.
This is a real book.
That is some.
Yes.
That is laced
Yes.
right there.
Yeah, it's a clearly a work of fiction, but that's the topic. It's a
Wow.
It's a work of fiction.
making it around today. Yes, for now, that's true. So it's a Terminator-esque story of saving Stonewall Jackson's life.
Saving
but,
Stonewall Jackson instead of saving Private Ryan.
So one thing that I've been encountering on social media a lot lately, and especially because I run an account on TikTok, which is the Wild West of social media. I reach millions of people through that platform, but also get a lot of ignorant opinions. I could just say that. Not wrong opinions, but just simply not knowing. And one thing that I've been running into a lot lately, as I've been posting things to do with this battle, in the lead up to the battle, and of course yesterday is the anniversary of George Meade taking command of the Army of the Potomac. And over and over and over, I hear the same sentiment expressed that Meade got lucky, and not because Stonewall wasn't there, but just kind of in general. And he and or the Union Army, they happened to be on the high ground. The Confederates just, they kind of just didn't work out. It should have. It's generally what, of course, if, but there's this constant public idea that the Union Army just was second class. And as I'm preparing for my tours this weekend, I've been focusing a lot on the first day's fighting. Mm-hmm. Which my ancestor, John, your ancestor at the 150th, was there. It's a particularly interesting part of the thing. And I heard John Hoptack say the other day on an old battlefield walk, speaking of, that he did a few years ago, saying basically that he felt that the Union Army on July 1st pretty much did everything that they needed to do right. Mm-hmm. And that the Confederate Army pretty much made every decision that they could have made wrong. I thought that was a strong way to put it, but after sitting on this for a week now, after he said that and digging into, specific regimental movements and stuff on that day, the more I feel like, maybe with some aspects of the 11th Corps as an exception, that's really kind of true, I think. The Union Army's performance is chronically underrated. But I want to get an idea of what you guys think of that notion of, they got lucky. They just happened to be there. They were where they wanted to be. They made those decisions. Buford, Reynolds, Howard, Hancock, all on the first day to choose where they were going to fight, intentionally set themselves up to be able to defend themselves the way they did. That's my feeling. Do you guys feel that that's the case, or do any of you feel that luck maybe played into it and maybe Lee should have won somehow because he's supposed to? That's just what's on my mind. So maybe use that as a starting point. Who knows what the hell we'll talk about for the next 45 minutes. But I've been thinking a lot about that topic this last couple of days of that first day intentional performance of the Union Army.
There's definitely a lot to unpack there. So
yeah.
Someone else can start because I have a lot to say.
So for me, the first thing I jumped to was Iverson's brigade up on Oak Ridge. You talk about doing everything wrong. Yeah, get your whole brigade slaughtered. That's a good way to start the battle. for me, the first day is very much the way I've always looked at it is very much the story of brigades. You know, it's easy to think, okay, the Iron Brigade coming through, Iverson's brigade on Oak Ridge, but that's kind of the way it comes up because, you know, everyone's getting to Gettysburg in that moment. And so Iverson's like, I don't need pickets. What are the odds there's Union soldiers on the other side of that wall? And then they come up and that's it. And no one ever hears from Iverson or his brigade again. And so for me, yeah, I think you could say, did they get lucky? You make your own luck. And there is some aspect to, well, you pick the ground. I think Buford could never get enough credit in my eyes for what he does on that day. I don't know that, you know, Buford, that's kind of his moment in the Civil War. It comes up, Gettysburg, boom, and then he's dead like a year later, right? So, yeah, for me on the first day, I think the Union Army deserves a lot more credit than perhaps some people are willing to give it.
Yeah, I feel like we can get to the choice thing, but they did everything that they could. I'll leave it at that. That's sort of my, like, given that situation. But Avery or John, I'll let you guys pick up there.
Go ahead, Avery.
John, by all means.
I think we hear a lot of this stuff about the U.S. Army got lucky. And I call them the U.S. Army because they are the U.S. Army. The U.S. Army got lucky on the first day, or they got lucky in the whole, you know, fight or whatever the case may be. I think we hear this because for years we've had the deification of Robert E. Lee, and he is unflappable. He can't make mistakes, and yet from these people we also hear that he needs Stonewall Jackson to win. So. Apparently, he does make mistakes. It's a double-edged sword in that way, you know. I have always been under the impression, and this is kind of going with this a little off here just for a second, since we are unscripted here, with this deification process of Bobby Lee. We have made a pretty much, in my opinion, average mid-19th century general into this thing, into like this bigger thing than he really is. And what kept him a great professional leader up until Gettysburg was the leadership in the Army of Northern Virginia. He had 2 great corps commanders. He had great brigade commanders, division commanders who knew what they were doing. They knew how to lead a division. They knew how to lead a corps. And when that shattered after Chancellorsville, you have all these green guys who are like, now it's the first time they're leading a division, or now it's the first time they're leading a corps, and they're not used to that. And they're going into this huge battle, into this campaign. So it's almost a miscalculation from the beginning to even do this, because you're saying, all right, boys, we're going to hit the ground running, and we're just going to invade the North again. And we're going to do the most trying thing you can do as an army. And so it's on. I agree with John in the fact that maybe it's true. Maybe the Army of Northern Virginia did do everything wrong on the first day, as far as, you know, coming to that area and getting on the field and doing what they needed to do. However, they fought hard that day, and you know, both sides did, obviously. But I think that the issue was that Army of Northern Virginia is so spread out, and they can't communicate. They don't have an interior line just like the U.S. Army does. On the first day, even, they have interior lines. You know, I really don't think luck has anything to do with it. I think it's all these U.S. Army commanders have picked the ground. They know where they're going. Reynolds knows what he's supposed to be doing, as we heard from Kent Masterson Brown in his great book on that. He's got the stuff in his pockets. He knows. He's got his orders. And he knows exactly what he's doing. And Buford knows what he's doing. He's cutting that road. And so from the very outset of the fight, they know exactly why they're there. So it can't be luck in my mind, because they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cameron, John, you guys have nailed it. I mean, there's definitely been this deification of Lee in the last 159 years of memory when we look at the Civil War. And I mean, and I get that all the time. Meade's lucky. Lee was off his game. I'm like, if we really want to throw those kinds of hands, I'm gonna say this: anyone who listens to the show knows my stances on Robert E. Frickin' Lee. But I will say, Lee, you could easily turn the table and say he's lucky he's not facing a more capable commander prior to Gettysburg. And you can even argue that, like McClellan, Burnside, Hooker, in my experience and the research we've done over the years, they all have pretty strong points. We have to remember that this is still the 19th century. These armies are massive. And in most cases where Lee was facing the Army of the Potomac is going to outnumber them vastly. So I want people to realize just how freaking difficult it is to manage an army of more than 60,000 people in 1860s, whatever. Like, it's already difficult for Lee, but Lee also, like John said, he had Longstreet and Jackson. He could delegate it to those two guys. They could get it done. He could delegate cavalry stuff to Stuart. He'd get it done. He had capable people he could rely on. The Army of the Potomac is one of the most politicized armies in U.S. military history. So you have to understand there's a lot of things working against the Army of the Potomac. Like, they're fighting not only Lee to their front, but themselves in a way. So with all that drama going on in the previous campaigns, let's use Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, for example, there's a lot going on. I mean, there's pressure from Washington, obviously. The more the war goes on, the more defeats that occur. The Army of the Potomac is going to have these moments where, a lot more is going to be expected of them as they go forward. So there's more pressure. And anyone who's been under or had to perform under pressure knows that, you may not always perform the best when you're nervous or whatnot. I mean, geez Louise, Meade gets the command of the army and he sees it as like, well, this is my death sentence. Like, he does not want this job. Nobody wants this job. John Reynolds said, hey, Meade wants it. Like, don't give it to me, man. Like, look at how many people didn't want this job. But let's also look at George Meade. Everyone just thinks he's lucky. You have probably the most capable commander in the Army of the Potomac. Let's go back to the 7 days. Meade is in charge of, I believe, a brigade of the Pennsylvania Reserves at 7 days and performs very well at Beaver Dam Creek / Mechanicsville, even at Gaines Mills, which is the only tactical Confederate victory in that whole battle. Still does a very good job there. Does well at South Mountain, does well at Antietam, does extremely well at Fredericksburg, cracking Stonewall Jackson's line. And also, even though he doesn't really do much with the 5th Corps at Chancellorsville, I'd say May 1st is pretty big. But as we see how that plays out, the 5th Corps is kind of more off the board for the May 2nd and 3rd fighting, but still one of the more capable commanders. And it's proven just how quickly he rises through the ranks, going from, in a year's time, commanding a brigade to commanding an army. Like, that's remarkable. And Ken Masterson Brown's book really does lay it out. I mean, if you're George Meade, you have probably one of the most difficult military situations in any kind of military history class. I mean, you're taking command of an army, which, mind you, most of your men are going home. Their 2-year enlistments are up. You got to hopefully hope that most of these guys sign on again, or you got to wait for reinforcements, and who knows when that's going to happen. So you're already going into this campaign with an army that is more close in numbers with the Confederate army. Like, they're more evenly matched almost. So it's not like, he just chose to go on the defensive because he was scared. I'm like, no, it's pretty smart given the circumstances. Not to mention, it's not like everyone planned to fight at Gettysburg. This whole myth of the battle beginning over shoes is like one of my favorites because it's absolute BS. The reason these armies just congregate to Gettysburg is that road network. You have 10 different roads intersecting out of this town. These armies are going to find their way there. It's just a matter of who gets there first. It's kind of like, it's funny we mentioned Terminator. It's like, like Terminator 2 when they're like, we send a cyborg back in time to kill John Connor, then we send another one back in time to save him. It was just a question of which one would reach him first. It's the same thing with Gettysburg. It's a town with a strategic road network, a strategic place on the map, and it's just a question of which army gets there first. Now, with that in mind, when you look at July 1st, I would agree, it's probably, I think Cameron, you said it, it's one of the more important days of the battle. It's probably one of the more pivotal days. It definitely shapes July 2nd and 3rd. Everything that happens on those last 2 days, you're not getting without the events of the 1st. And you have to remember, it's only, a division of U.S. cavalry and 2 corps against 2/3 of the Confederate Army in Northern Virginia. And though by the end of the day, tactically, the U.S. forces have been pushed back. They fight like hell to keep that high ground south of town. They utilize the topography west and north of town to, to their advantage as long as they can. So, I mean, whether it was known to everybody in the ranks or not, it's a buy for time. It's an issue of time. I'm like, we have the movie Dunkirk, which has that watch, the ticking that goes through.
Yeah.
You could do the same thing with July 1st. That kind of suspense, that tension, that is there on that first day. And there are so many moving parts, so many commanders. Just, Buford's in command, then Reynolds arrives. Reynolds is in command for 10 minutes. He gets killed. Doubleday, who never thought he'd be in command of a corps, is now, having to make these decisions. Then Oliver Otis Howard arrives, and he's like, I'm the highest ranking guy. We're going to make it a stand here on Cemetery Hill. Then Hancock comes up, says, hey, nobody else trusts you, Howard. I'm going to take over. There's so many shifting parts on that first day. And even with all of that, there is that strategic success of utilizing that high ground south of town. And not even, the armies aren't even all there by the end of the first day. They're still going to be arriving on July 2nd. We still have this battle unfolds. And Cam, you said it, man. July 1st is a fight of brigades. It's the day of brigades. It is just, if you get to Gettysburg, you start fighting. I mean, quite literally, the Iron Brigade just throws off their knapsacks, walks right into a fight. I mean, it's just such a chaotic way to start a battle. And if you really look at some of the previous campaigns, we haven't really seen that in a while up until this point. I mean, there was a lot more planning, a lot more preparation, and there was a lot more anticipation. But this fight literally starts by accident. So this is one of those interesting cases that you get to see play out on the first day. Yeah.
I like, there's two ideas there. I think not that were, I mean, obviously the chaos and the fighting at the command at the brigade level through that fight, the fact that the clock was ticking. Like, I don't think there was any expectation of anybody then or now that reads about the battle that the First Corps was going to hold to the west of Gettysburg. And they were going to fend off 11th or 80, or both of them, or any of them, anything that was fighting on the first day. I think they knew that they're not fighting to hold McPherson's Ridge and Seminary's Ridge. That's just not part of it.
And even if they were, I mean, it's 22,000 U.S. soldiers against 40,000 Confederates. It's numbers
from
game after that.
Sides.
You're not in a great position, and it's a hard task to cover. I mean, 6 out of those 10 roads leading north and west out of town. It's just tough,
And so what aspect of that? And then what aspect of that is luck? And how do you say, Meade lucked into that situation, and like that it wasn't. But what both two of you guys mentioned that little bit, I see it as almost like a crossover of declining quality of cohesive Army of Northern Virginia leadership versus the ascendancy of better qualified Union leaders, which there's been a lack of to this point, because all the figures that are at Gettysburg in corps command roles or division command roles are the same individuals who continue to increase this Army's success all the way until they defeat the Confederates. Mm-hmm. It's not the case with the Confederates. Some of the more famous names historically that people celebrate and we have, paintings of and sculptures of and all that stuff. Gettysburg is it for a lot of them, if not before, with obviously Stonewall Jackson, but the others. And so I see this as like, wow, this is where, the not the high water mark as far as military strategy, but just leadership quality. Like it's one of those battles where they, somebody I was watching earlier was saying how Ewell, without his leg, like he just wasn't the same commander, and a lot of them are damaged that way, and they're just not the same guy. And I feel the entire Army of Northern Virginia is that way after Gettysburg. Like it's not the same. It's not the same confidence, audacity, quality of cohesive leadership, and all these things. It just, you never see it again after that. But the Union Army, I feel like, gets their act together more and more and more and more and more as the cream rises to the top in leadership, because it had some garbage ass leadership in 1861 and 62. By late 1864, man, they're like, wow, they're staying on mission and they're doing these things, and they're just familiar names from Gettysburg. I think it's. I don't know.
I think you're right on the mark, Richard, in that for decades, for generations, we've talked about Gettysburg is Gettysburg the turning point of the war? Is Gettysburg the turning point of the war? We think of it from the victory perspective.
Mhm.
Like, okay, the Union won, so this is the turning point. It's going to be all over after that, and it's all downhill and whatever. Maybe we need to think of it more as the from the leadership standpoint as the turning point of the war, where you kind of get them now in the U.S. Army's now in their groove, so to speak, and they're a machine now. They're starting to work like they should be working. They really start acting like it right after that. By the Overland Campaign, they're a killing machine in the Overland Campaign. They really are. They're meeting so much stiff resistance. Obviously, it's Spotsylvania and Cold Harbor and all this other stuff, and they're getting the short end of the stick. But by then, I mean they've cut their wagon trains down to a minimum. They're actually marking off places in the field for their artillery to know the yardage. They got all this stuff going on. It's almost like the idea of war starts to change for these guys, where it becomes a little bit different too. It's like a turning point in that way, where it becomes more of a profession for some volunteer soldiers who were farmers, 6 months ago. Now they're starting to learn how to really do this, and they have strong leadership to do it with.
What do you guys think of the experience of Gettysburg itself for Union leadership cascading down? Do you think relationships coalesce, or part like these guys? Is there less sort of politicized infighting without guys like McClellan and Hooker and so on? They kind of like, wow, they formed a clique kind of after Gettysburg that they I don't know how else to describe it, but they just kind of got just more tightly bundled together as a leadership group. Do you think that's the because Avery, you're so familiar with what happens in the Overland Campaign and things like? Do you think that organization would have been that way had Gettysburg not gone as successfully as it did? Or I'm a little fumbling with the question here a little bit. I hope you're kind of getting my point.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the way I approach Gettysburg, especially after working at Fredericksburg, is looking at it's a turning point. Yes, may not be the military turning point. I know that a lot of people have Vicksburg as a real bigger, military strategic turning point. But I look at Gettysburg as a psychological turning point, not just for the Union officers, but for the Union soldiers themselves.
Okay.
The way we looked at Fredericksburg, and if you look at the campaigns prior to that battle, it's still very much that war of reunion. It's this war of brother against brother, and it's more of a quote unquote gentleman's war. And then the Union soldiers just get mauled to death, quite literally, in front of that stone wall at Marie's Heights. So if this is not a personal conflict that is not violence and just gratuitousness, and it is just brother v brother, why are these guys chanting Fredericksburg after Pickett's charge? You're damn right this is personal. This is absolutely for them, for these U.S. soldiers in the Army of the Potomac. The Confederates are no longer their misguided brethren like they were before Fredericksburg, and maybe they weren't at the beginning for some of them, but for a lot of them it was. For a lot of the officers it was. But after Fredericksburg, they're the enemy. And then after Chancellorsville, this army goes north again, this time into a northern state. Like Maryland, obviously, as a border state, it's still an invasion of the north, but not of soldiers in the Army of the Potomac may not have those personal ties. But my God, and Pennsylvania soldiers make up a significant portion of the Army of the Potomac. So with these Confederate soldiers on their home soil, in a lot of regards, this is a very personal campaign for a lot of these U.S. soldiers and for the leaders like John Reynolds, like George Meade, who are Pennsylvanians. And so, after Gettysburg, I would say, okay, let me just say this. This army is still going to make mistakes in 1864. There's still going to be politicized BS going on, obviously. We've talked about that in past programs and whatnot. But like you said, there's still this drive of, getting shit done in 64, knowing that there's a job to do. We started it at Gettysburg. Damn right, we're going to finish this at Appomattox, even though we know they don't know Appomattox is coming. But there's still that end of the line that they have as a goal. And, I think that's a big thing is that, Grant, when he took command in 64, he told Meade, Lee's army is your target. Wherever he goes also. And there's a reason why Meade is like, oh man, I like this guy. Even though their command structure is a whole nother bag of bones, there's definitely, I think Meade realizes that we have to destroy this army, or we have to defeat this army in the field if we're going to win this war. So, it's less of these kind of, even if you look at the Mine Run, the Bristow Station campaigns after Gettysburg, Meade still does a pretty decent job, even though we don't get another big clash in the East like Gettysburg for the rest of 1863. There's still that understanding that we need to try to pursue Lee. We need to try to find another opportunity to get him into open battle and defeat him. And, I think for the leadership at Gettysburg, I think Meade especially is one of the first to realize that, and really is the minds that they need to lead them forward in this type of warfare. And I mean, just look at how brutal the fighting is during this battle. I mean, it's a 3-day battle, and we have between 45,000 and 50,000 casualties. And, it's not just because, they just loved, it was summer, it was hot, and they liked killing. No, I mean, it's a personal conflict, and both sides know there's a lot riding on this. But it's more than just knowing this could be the final fight if, whoever wins, what have you. But it's that personal, psychological aspect of it that you have to take into account. And I think it's so important for both U.S. commanders and enlisted men at Gettysburg is they can finally see that we can beat these guys. They're not invincible. So we can finish this. So in that regard, this campaign is a turning point, not maybe necessarily militarily, because obviously we know Army Northern Virginia is going to be a tough nut to crack in 64 and 65. But the Army of the Potomac psychologically no longer sees them as this invincible phantom force that keeps beating them. These men bleed and die just like we do, and we can beat them. And I think that is probably one of the most important lessons that U.S. commanders and soldiers take from that campaign.
I see.
So I want to jump in because Avery, I had been thinking about this, and then you raised this point. For me, something that I'm really interested in, and I think needs to be weighed more. Like you said, that this is a personal and battle for many being waged on Pennsylvania soil, but it's also, I think, a moment for now, the Emancipation Proclamation to have to get teeth put into it. Because here Lee's army is not shy about the fact they are acting as slave catchers, right?
Yep.
There are free African Americans in Pennsylvania, many who lived in Gettysburg, who have to flee Gettysburg during the battle for fear that the Army of Northern Virginia will capture them and sell them south into slavery, which happens to free African Americans in Gettysburg. The other thing for me is, and this is inspired by, if you guys haven't read it yet, it's a 10 out of 10 book. Elizabeth Leonard's new biography of Benjamin Butler, which gives a great insight into how Lincoln handles his political generals. And for me, we recognize that, there's the joke that Schimmelfinning, I need a lot more Schimmelfinnings in my army. And then he spends the Battle of Gettysburg hiding in a pig pen. But it's that, to me, we get to Gettysburg and Lincoln's like, okay, I kind of now just need to get the guys who are going to get results. Which I think goes back to our earlier talk about Meade, is that Meade's effective. Meade is, if I remember correctly, like a little Democrat, like in the McClellan camp, but he's not obnoxious about it. He's not an offensive guy. Everyone's willing to tolerate Meade, even if he is a googly-eyed snapping turtle or whatever they call him, that they're willing to tolerate him. And I think that gets to that sense of, okay, the politics that dominate Union command across any army in 1861 and 1862, the John Fremonts and Ben Butlers of the army, we got to shelve these guys because we have to get serious here about this. And I think Lincoln getting rid of Joe Hooker is kind of that moment for me that captures it. Hooker is the darling of DC for so many of these politicians who love him. And so putting Hooker on the shelf in June, what is it today? June 28th, June 29th. I should probably know what day it is, but putting Hooker on the shelf is, I think, to me, Lincoln recognizing, all right, the political generals aren't going to win me anything. I need generals who are going to win because I'm now up on the election block in a year.
Absolutely.
Well, let's let's switch things to the southern side for
Sure.
a little bit, just for the sake of who knows, whatever. What? Because I started off with a pretty sour tone about the Confederates doing everything wrong, and standing up for my people of the First Corps, the Army of the Potomac, and how they didn't get lucky. So I don't want to give the impression too that I'm like, that pendulum swing back now. That's like, if everybody's taking Meade's in a favorable light, then we got to therefore crap on the Confederates extra, because they certainly had some pretty good performances at that battle too. They could have had a slightly different outcome on many points of that battlefield. If you guys had to speculate on that moment, because this is another thing I've been thinking about, is there was like, oh, if they just got between Sickles, they would have cut the army in half. And then it's like, well, they would have got behind Sickles, then reinforcements from elsewhere would have come in. Or if Sickles didn't go out, the Union arm would have, and it's like, were the Confederates just going to go Fredericksburg and just go slam straight into them if they were back on Cemetery Ridge? There's so much that's all this what if stuff. That again, it's like it all goes into that luck and timing of this. The Confederates could have just done that or could have just done this. But if you guys had to pick a really good performance on the Confederate side, what would you nominate? Like, who's maybe a brigade or a division, or even a corps commander that's like, man, they did pretty well at that point or this point, or despite that they didn't really succeed anywhere on any of the 3 days. Who do you respect on the Confederate side? I think Avery looks like you're thinking real hard.
So I want to go back to what you raised earlier about, Ewell getting criticized a lot because he didn't have his leg. It should also be noted that Ewell, this is his first time as a corps commander. It's also the first time the Army of Northern Virginia is 3 corps instead of 2. A.P. Hill's also new to corps command. He's commanded a large body of troops, obviously the Light Division being one of the larger bodies of infantry in Lee's army. But Hill and Ewell, this is their first campaign where they're on the offensive, going into enemy territory, and they're commanding a large body of soldiers. And Ewell, he's got some of the largest divisions in the army in his unit. So does Anderson and Rhodes' divisions are massive. And I would say if I had to pick somebody that's doing well, it's probably Rhodes. It's probably, I could even say, I gotta give my 5 cents to Harry Heath, even though he kind of stumbles into the fight and gets, the thumbs down for bringing on a battle against Lee's orders. Once that fight is on, he commits some of his best brigades to that fight on the first day. Pettigrew's guys do really good, and I would say Johnston Pettigrew at the brigade level performs very, very well. He's probably looked at as one of the more respectable commanders in the Confederate Army. And to the point where, he's the one chosen to take over Heath's division and Pickett's charge. And but we have to look at the fact that, you can criticize Hill and Ewell, and obviously poor James Longstreet. I have a soft spot for Longstreet just because, he's obvious, he's one of Grant's friends, he's one of U.S. Grant's best friends from before the war. But also, everyone's like, well, if Longstreet pulled his head out of his ass and done what Lee asked him to. Well, the fact that Longstreet doesn't get Lee's ear in this campaign at all, and he's telling him, he's like, I think this is a bad idea, man. I think we should be doing anything but we're doing. But Lee is so tunnel vision, and this happens to some of the best commanders. I think Gettysburg is the case where, we love to find a scapegoat that isn't Robert E. Lee, but at the end of the day, he's the commander of the Army. It's his decisions that lead to the events that play out. And ultimately, even when Longstreet's, bitching and moaning and dragging his feet, July 2nd, he does come extremely close down there at the Peach Orchard, wheat field, to, overrunning Union positions. Whether that wins the battle or not, we don't know. I don't like getting bogged down with what ifs. I think so many people get all these what ifs, and you're going to get more with this battle than any other fight in the war. It's just like, I think it fuels that lost cause mentality. I think people get lost in, what could have been. I'm like, well, I think as Americans, we probably should root for the U.S. Army, but that's just me. taking a very controversial stance. But at the same time, the Confederates do perform well. No one's knocking these guys. They do fight
Yeah.
very well. They have great leadership. Longstreet is probably one of the better leaders, probably one of the best leaders in the Army of Northern Virginia. But yet, because of his actions during Gettysburg, he just gets shit on by Southern historians to this day. I mean, people still hate Longstreet just because, well, you do what your general tells you to do. I'm like, well, he did, just not in the way that Lee wants. But also take into regard that Lee is sick as a dog during this campaign. So, I'm not saying that's why he's not 100%, but there are factors that go into this. There are so many layers, just like the Army of the Potomac and all its politics, all its finagling and everything. Confederacy has the same thing. You mentioned Iverson's brigade. The guy is probably the least qualified asshole to be leading a brigade, and yet he's right there in the midst of it because he's a political general too. So I think there are a lot of great commanders like Pettigrew. There's a lot of bad ones like Iverson, both commanding brigades, and they rise to the occasion. Longstreet's still one of the best commanders in the Confederate Army. We see that post-Gettysburg, but I think we have to take into effect that Longstreet doesn't really want to attack. You also have to take into the fact that Hill and Ewell are new to command at corps level, so they're going to make mistakes, and Lee probably should have had them on tighter leashes, or at least should have been delegating orders a little more strictly instead of just being more lenient like he was with Jackson and Longstreet. I mean, this isn't the same army. This just isn't the same army. It's changed. And Chancellorsville is so important to look at because of that. Because, I mean, this army lost a significant amount of its officers at that battle. So this is the campaign where a lot of people are stepping into command for the first time. And so some are going to pass that test, others are going to fail it. And you're going to see that again at the Wilderness in 1864, because just like Chancellorsville, Gettysburg's going to trim a lot of the officer fat from this army. And it's just something that I think the Confederates have to act on the fly with, I think. And I think that's why this campaign is so fascinating, because for both armies, there are a lot of new people in leadership commands, but the Confederate Army is very fascinating because, this is the first time that three-corps structure, the first time they're actually going into a northern state officially. And, this is something that's like definitely going to be under a microscope, even not just as for us now, but at the time, people in the South and the North are going to be examining this. I mean, hell, look at the turnout at Gettysburg in the months that follow. So I think it's just for the Confederates themselves, I think we just have to remember the layers that go with it. Nothing is just clear cut and dry with this army.
So, Cameron, what do you've clearly listed Iverson on your not good Confederate commander list. Who do you think? Who's a pick for you that somebody said you got a favorite Confederate commander at Gettysburg? Who would be yours?
So I was thinking about whether or not I would say this, and I'm gonna say it. I would think the best has to be John Bell Hood, because he's the one smart enough to get shot before it starts, and then no one can blame him for anything. But in all seriousness, I do pick Hood and Hood's division as people who deserve credit at Gettysburg. I think Hood recognizes and makes the legitimate protest that, like, this isn't the way we should do it. And Longstreet, I think, Avery, to your point, that Longstreet's like, I'm with you here, John, but that's kind of where our hands are kind of tied. And so Hood launches that attack. He gets wounded right away. I think it's law that has to pop up in division command. And you look at the order of battle for Hood's division, and guys just drop left and right in regimental and brigade command. And so to make the kind of push they do on that south side of the Union line there, considering the fact that no one knows who's giving orders or, what rank they've actually been up to, there's probably someone commanding a regiment and doesn't know it. And so I think Hood's division gets credit. I have a soft spot for Hood. For whatever reason. So I think Hood, I start with the joke of, well, he got wounded. Well, his guys did pretty well considering that they lost I would say beloved division commander at that moment.
And like to your point, Cameron, that you said about the first day, I think it still carries over into the second, that it's still a fight of brigades. I mean, you look at the maps, and it's like Law's brigade against Vincent's brigade, and then it's Anderson's brigade against Ward's brigade, and then De Trobriand again. Like it's so sporadic.
Yeah, especially in that Wheatfield area and Devil's Den, that area, there's divisions or.
To quote the movie, it's the worst ground you ever saw, because it really was. I mean, you've been out there. Yeah. I wouldn't want to fight there, even by today's standards. It's like, Rose Woods is no joke, and the Wheatfield's no joke. And, the topography absolutely enables the defender, but also hinders them, and vice versa for the attacker. So that's where you're going to get these brigade on brigade fights like that. And it's chaos. And yeah, to your point, Cameron, I mean, they do get pretty far. They took them big rocks, most of them anyway.
So we got a Wheatfield mention. So I want to jump in here if I can with, I sent Rich a message about some letters I came across. An interesting set where it is a mother who sends two sons off in the 62nd PA in the start of 1862. And these letters, before I forget, are at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. They're all online, all transcribed on their website. So go check them out. This is by no means like I found this in a dusty box. I found it on Google. But William Lowry, who is an officer, I think he's a major at the time of the battle in the 62nd Pennsylvania, who is killed out in the wheat field. His brother had been killed in the winter of 1862 and 1863 as an accidental gunshot wound as the bugler in camp. So already a story there. But for me, the most fascinating part, his letters are pretty standard Civil War letters. But his mother keeps a diary during the Battle of Gettysburg. And she's in Pennsylvania, in the western part of the state, in Clarion County. So she's keeping up to date with it. And she writes on July 2nd, the day that her son would be killed, "I've thought a great deal about the soldiers, how they have to suffer. Oh, my Savior, shelter them from the stormy blast." By the end of, or by the 6th of July, she writes how anxious she is of her dear son and trusting in God. And then the next entry, Tuesday, July 7th, "It is reported my dear son is killed. Lord forbid it should be true." And so to follow this through, that's just a plug for these letters, which blew my mind when I read them at like 1 a.m. during finals week, procrastinating. That out there in the chaos, for us as regimental and, historians looking at it on those levels, how difficult it is to make sense of the Wheatfield. But the cultural implications for people trying to make sense of what happened in the Wheatfield, like the Lowry family, is certainly another thought that for each man, we've talked about, some of these divisions or the brigades, that there's probably a lot more diary entries like that out there.
Sure. Absolutely. I was just doing a post on the Civil War Seattle TikTok today about a man, pretty well known, Edward. I forget his last name. He was a captain in the 17th U.S. Infantry, and he's wounded. They say it's hard to know because it's like they're coming down the Little Round Top or something. That whole section of the field, I wouldn't even know. It's rocks and water and bushes, and it's that mess in that section of the field. He gets wounded. The Confederate bullet goes through his chest, through his lung, and lodges by his spine, obviously on the second. Pretty gruesome stuff. And he's in a field hospital. On July 7th, he sends a telegraph home to Massachusetts to his brother and says, "Just so you know, I'm wounded, and I'm okay at the moment. The doctors think I'm going to be all right. That they say that the wound is not mortal, and I expect to be moved by train to Baltimore tomorrow." And this is written on July 7th. It's a telegram he gets out. So obviously with this, he's not sending a letter home, but communication gets back to Massachusetts pretty quick. His brother comes immediately, gets on a train to get to Baltimore or to Gettysburg to help care for him. And he passes away on the 8th, right after he sent that. So that communication, like you said, and that mystery of someone and that one's especially interesting to me because I was thinking about, is he sending that telegram home to not worry his family because he knows he's effed because he's got a bullet in his spine and a hole in his lung, and he's just saying like, hey, I'm gonna be all right, I'll be back to it in no time, knowing that is that why he sent it on the 7th verse, and he dies the next day? Or does he legitimately think it's okay, but his brother thinks he's going to be fine and then shows up to find out, oh, he died 3 days ago when he arrives? And just that like you said, it goes from this chaos of brigades and this and that, and then it can just immediately go down to the human side of the chaos in those places, that it extends to the human level from the command structure to the fighting itself to what happens after the battle to communicating with the families and so on. There's a guy here in Seattle. He was with the 11th Virginia Kemper's Brigade. John, I've probably messaged you about this fellow. Right. He's buried in the Seattle Cemetery. He's one of the earliest arrivals of Eastern Civil War veterans. When I say that, I mean guys that fought in the war, not guys that were in Washington in a fort. In the 1870s, he was in the 11th Virginia. He's wounded in Pickett's charge, and he writes a letter home to his father in North Carolina from a hospital in New York. And he writes on like July 18th or something. And he's writing, by now you've probably seen my name on the casualties list. And just so you know, I'm still alive and it's not that bad. And that it takes weeks for the family in some cases to get news of what the ultimate fate of someone on July 2nd or 3rd was, if they got it at all. I mean, obviously, a lot of them were just in the ground and never to be known of again or captured and sent wherever. But those are all interesting things where we can see that home connection and the Gettysburg connection kind of actually happen in real time, reflecting the same chaos that was in the battle itself. I think that's to me, that's really captivating stuff.
Rich, I want to add one last point to that. Another example of stuff that's available online for people who are interested. Gettysburg College, their special collections collection online is called Get Digital, has the letters of George Washington Beetleman, who Avery knows the collection. It's a popular one, I think, among Gettysburg students for us to work with. But he writes a letter essentially on July 3rd that's like, if I'm wounded, here's the letter that you should send my dad.
Yep.
And then so that's like dated July 3rd, and then July 4th, there's the letter he writes to his dad that's like, hey, I got wounded.
Yeah, I got it.
And so it's really interesting to see what his priorities would be in those moments. So those are worth a read. I think there's like 15 of his letters that are available digitally on there. They're really cool reads and worth checking out to understand.
And more just keeps getting transcribed, discovered. It's a fantastic collection.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're getting a little long on time here, getting close up on an hour. So I won't keep you guys too much, and I think we're getting to a good point here where I can touch. I'm going to look at a couple of questions. The wandering historian, who's my friend Evan, who lives out here in Seattle, we do some stuff together with. I think he wants to see more of John's tattoos. I don't know what to make of that.
You have to join my OnlyFans for
that. He does have one, by the way. There is a tattooed historian OnlyFans.
There is a tattooed historian OnlyFans. I just haven't put anything up yet. So stay tuned, just in case I get really desperate.
Yeah,
there's U.S. soldier cosplays,
Yeah. I have an idea for it though, so get ready.
And then he also, I think he has two other questions. Which side of the Gettysburg had the stronger set of leadership? I think maybe before he tuned in, we had pretty much spent the first half hour really talking about that, so we'll rehash that. Kendrick is watching. What's up? And a lot of our usual other watcher from here in Washington and Northwest and other places as well, which is great. But since it's unscripted and we don't have to stay on the Gettysburg topic to satisfy Evan Muxon, the wandering historian, he does ask, who do we think had the best facial hair of the Civil War?
I'm just going to make a plug.
Cameron.
John knows, I think exactly where I'm going with this.
Yes.
When I was a young, full of energy and zeal undergrad at
not
Gettysburg
younger.
College. I wrote a piece for our blog that I pitched as a joke. John, you were in that meeting. I
I was
pitched
in
as a
that
joke
meeting.
where I said,
Yeah.
let me write a blog post for our blog about the 10 most attractive officers at Gettysburg. And that I will admit to all
I read
readership
that.
data I can acquire on my history publishing is the most viewed piece of my writing is the
Sex
objectification
sells,
of 10 Civil War officers.
Yep.
Everyone from medical corps surgeons to I think regimental commanders is as low as I went, but I ranked the 10 most attractive.
He did.
So facial hair. This is gonna be a controversial one. I'm actually gonna say Francis Barlow has the best facial hair at Gettysburg because he represents all of us who cannot grow facial hair. And to rock the baby-faced look throughout the campaign. I'm going to say, you know what, give Barlow some credit because that's an intentional decision.
He probably had
Maybe.
some fuzz. He probably had like a shadow.
Yeah, probably had, the little campaign stubble.
Yeah, peach fuzz.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say I think Barlow has to get some credit because that's a bold facial hair move.
Yeah. To be a high-ranking officer in the Civil War and not have facial hair that's a statement. You're really going against the grain to shave regularly.
My kind of
in
guy.
the
That's a ballsy move.
1860s.
Yeah.
So that question, that could be any general in the war, or does it have to be at Gettysburg?
No, I think, well, whatever. It's unscripted, so it could be in whenever you feel like it.
I would say the best facial hair the entire war. It is not Ambrose Burnside in this. Some people probably thinking that. It's going to be Mr. George Crook, the Army of the Canal Commander. Look at that.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. My guy has triangles for beard.
Dorito sideburns.
Does
That's
everyone
nice.
see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the best angle for it. I mean, come on.
And they're out to past his shoulder scales. That is pretty, that is pretty impressive.
George Crook takes that cake for the best beard facial.
My candidate would be, and then I'll let John wrap it up, would be a guy whose name I can't remember. He was a New Jersey cavalry officer that had similar triangles, and he was European. And man, I've posted about him. I wish I could find it because when I posted, I declared him the grand champion of Civil War facial hair. It was unbelievable, and yeah, he was a European, like, and not German, like from like Belgium or something. He commanded a regiment or brigade of cavalry. He was somehow involved with New Jersey. I remember that. And he died in like Thailand in a hot air balloon accident after the war. In Southeast Asia or Afghanistan or something. And he was in a hot air balloon and he was going over a lake and the balloon just dropped in the lake and that was it. But his facial hair was unbelievable. I really wish I could draw the name right now.
Wife where he died, or was that where he died?
No, I don't think he was. He was like this global playboy kind of guy, and I don't think he was. He had a wife, but
that's not him.
Yeah. So, John, what do you think? We'll wrap on this. John's favorite facial hair of the war.
Yeah, the guy.
If you got one,
who never has facial hair is going to comment on this. I mean, I like the way Cameron went because you do have that is ballsy to go through the Civil War and not have facial hair.
Yeah.
I'll just go. I don't really know who I would pick, but I would have to say that honorable mention. You got to have Ambrose Burnside.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
If something's named after you, do your facial hair. I mean that's legit in itself.
Yeah.
I always like just a quality like PGT Beauregard kind of look.
Ooh,
you know that with a little stuff on here. And I
he had like the Doc Holliday.
He had the Doc Holliday, and then he had like
Val Kilmer Doc Holliday
going on here. Yeah.
Huh.
I like that.
If
I could grow it out, that's the way I would have gone.
That's an unexpected choice. PGT Beauregard is facial hair winner of the Civil War. We have clearly gone into uncharted territory. with that.
Well, I mean,
I think
you were going to ask about like who we would have picked as the best like Confederate organization on the field at Gettysburg. And I was going to go with Alexander.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You didn't mention
I'm
that.
going to
So
go clear off like on a tangent with facial hair too. Where it's like
yeah. Well, do you have on that note? Maybe that could be the final. Let's swing back to Gettysburg for a second, because you didn't get to mention who you thought your best performing Confederate leader at Gettysburg
I just
was.
said I thought they got the short end of the stick. I thought Alexander's artillery battalion, because everyone for years said, "Oh, they overshot. You look at the casualty records and the damage in the center of the federal line from that, it's pretty hellish. And they're firing about 2 rounds a second into that part of the line. You got over 120 guns. If they're just pumping away, that's a lot of firepower. And yeah, some of them, obviously, a lot of them overshot, hit Meade's headquarters.
They're hitting people
went clear across Town Road. Yeah, they're striking Town Road and stuff. But it was one of those things too. I think I have a little soft spot for him. 1, because I did artillery in the reenacting field or in a reenacting hobby. But 2, I always felt bad for Alexander because he gets the short end of the stick of, okay, you decide when we go. And it's like, no, you are the commander, sir. Yeah. You decide. So I always thought like he got the short end of the stick with that, because then it's like you could almost pawn it off on him. Well, he told me to go. Alexander's the one who said go. And 2, you get the whole overshoot thing that's like too many people, when they hear about the overshooting of the federal line, and they hear obviously about shells hitting on the other side of the Tawnytown Road and striking ambulances on the Tawnytown Road and Meade's headquarters and all this sort of stuff, they think that it's every shell and that everyone in the front was untouched, when in actuality some of those guys, some of Cushing's guns took some heavy hits before.
Cushing himself took some heavy hits.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and even
caissons and all kinds of stuff, and it's just, and plus you have that firing down the line from the Peach Orchard area, so they can't really overshoot and not hit anything. They're hitting up towards Ziegler's Grove and our place. That part of it,
Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill even.
Yeah, there was there too.
That's kind of how I view that too. Is like they were hitting the Union Army.
Oh yeah.
Whether or not they were hitting, the 76th Pennsylvania directly laying down behind the stone wall or not, but they weren't throwing them to the east.
Right.
They're coming. They're hitting stuff psychologically. I agree. I think he gets a pretty bad rap. I know that the fuses and stuff were a big issue for them. With the K shot and everything. So that's a good point. And he doesn't. He's easy to lump into those.
Also, the more the guns discharge, more smoke filters into your field of view. People just forget how much smoke filters over a Civil War battlefield. Yeah. How visibility is actually pretty obscured when you think about it, especially with that many cannon going off that close to each other. The more you're firing, the more visibility is going to be infringed, to the point where Hunt just says, let's wait. Obviously, we want to let them think we're defeated and, are knocked out so they can come out. But also he's like, we can't see shit over there. So everyone, let's hold our fire till we can actually get some good targets. And as we all know, they eventually do. But
nobody on this panel has ever seen over 200 guns going off like that. Rich and I have seen maybe 70 going off at one time at Antietam. Yeah. But the fog helped, and we saw what it was like to not see shit. We couldn't see anything. When you got 200 and some going off and, little to no wind going, they can't see anything. And it's just nuts to tell the artillery commander, okay, you decide when the infantry should go target.
So, and all I will say, and my last point is, a mile-long line of troops emerging from a tree line is a much easier target to hit than a ridge line guesstimating. Where possible.
Like the crest of a ridge.
The crest of a ridge too. Not even. I was thinking that too. So, one of our viewers, Ryan Kaiser, who's a regular, found the New Jersey guy I was talking about. And he is if you took John's PGT Beauregard and you turned it into crook. You're gonna get this guy.
That's fantastic.
Percy. Yeah.
Percy Wyndham
Yeah.
is his name. So I can't get the focus,
Yep,
but that's who I was thinking of. So I think we kind of got a nice blend there of styles, and he would probably please any opinion in the group here.
That man always had leftovers.
Yeah. Yeah, and he somehow died involved a hot air balloon in India or wherever he was.
Well, we never know.
But all right, well, I want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight. We had a nice audience tonight. I wish we had gotten a few more questions, but also a lot of us can't shut up, so we wouldn't have even gotten the questions in anyway because we're a pretty talkative bunch. So quickly, just for those who may have not been here in the beginning, especially John and Avery, why don't you touch on just let everybody know where to find your stuff with your different social media work and whatnot, and then we'll wrap it up.
John, this is the second time we've been like,
I know. We're so nice.
Right. So you can follow us on iTunes and Spotify if you haven't listened to the podcast yet. We don't just cover the Civil War; we do cover as many military conflicts as we can,
and Star Wars and stuff
and
too.
Star Wars and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Yes, our most recent episode was Battle of Pelennor Fields, which was a lot of fun. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So if you do have a question for me, or for the podcast, you can message us. We will do our best to respond. And if you have something that is curious or that maybe we touched on, didn't quite elaborate on, you can definitely reach us there.
Cool.
Go to every social media site and just type in the Tattooed Historian. You will probably find me or a video that's somebody hating on me. So you'll find me one way or another. I mean, I'm on like 8 platforms now. I'm gaming on Twitch, which I might do actually later tonight. Because I'm home alone with the cat. So I'm probably going to be gaming for a little while, staying up late and partying. But if you go on Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff, on Twitter is the only one that I'm not the Tattooed Historian. I'm Inked Historian because the Tattooed Historian doesn't fit. But if you go on any other platform, including OnlyFans, the Tattooed Historian, just look me up and you'll find me there.
All right. And Cameron, what do you got coming up this summer or this fall? I know you got you talked about a round table in Kentucky or something. You want to maybe mention that?
Yeah. So in September, I'll be speaking at the Kentucky Civil War Roundtable. If you are in and around Lexington, come on down. I'll be talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald and the Civil War. Other things I've got going on. I'll be finishing up my master's thesis. I'm about 10 pages away from being done with my paper on James Beecher of the famous Beecher family, who's a Freedmen's Bureau agent. My only public facing social media is my Twitter. It's @Cam_Sowers. I don't post a lot of history things on there, but like occasionally there's some fun archival snippets or whatever I'm reading because I spend too much time doing that. So that's about it. Grad school takes up most of anytime I might have to do some fun stuff, but moments like this, nights like these, let me let my hair down a little bit, and have some fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Cameron, you're just going wild, buddy.
I know, man.
If you could only see
you may get invited back after this performance.
If you're going wild, Cameron, then I'm Martin Sheen from Apocalypse Now. Man.
Super out of control. So, and then for those of you who may be seeing Civil War Seattle for the first time tonight, I think we do get new viewers because I do post this in different groups and stuff on Facebook. I do programming like this with different authors and historians, and then I keep inviting guys like this back on over and over because we have fun conversations, and I like doing that rather than just have people lecture to you or tell us about something that their book is on. I think this is an innovative and fun way to do it, inspired a lot by what John and Avery have done with their podcasts and stuff. And also, usual, same as John, all social media, Civil War Seattle or Google, you'll find me on all of it. And lastly, I guess our tours. If you are interested in Gettysburg this weekend, I'm doing 2 tours, Saturday and Sunday on the anniversary weekend of Gettysburg, that are specifically towards telling the story of the Battle of Gettysburg, but through the experiences of the Seattle pioneers who were there on that battlefield. So it'll be a little overview of tactical history, but a lot of very individual stories about what they did on those 3 days in Pennsylvania in 1863, before they came here and built the city of Seattle. So that's my project at the moment, and I'm glad to talk about it this week and anytime. Gettysburg is always, I think, a welcome topic for everybody. So I just want to thank you guys for joining me again, and hopefully you'll be interested in doing this down the road with some other topics and some other things. And thanks everybody for watching and supporting us, and here at Seattle, and supporting John and the Battles and Banter podcast and everything else. So again, thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for joining me tonight. And we'll see you guys next time we do an Unscripted.
See you,
All right, good night, everybody.
Coming in.